Yes, this game was 85 moves long and so many highlights. But for me, the last part of the game was the most instructive. In this position, Black's pawn, this pawn is the one that's going to win the game. It's only one square away from promoting, and Magnus Carlsen, he played this typical maneuver. When you have a pawn only one square away from promotion, you want to release the square in front of it. He brought his rook to the other side of the board, and here, the pawn about to become a new queen. If it's captured, then we see the whole idea. Black brings his rook up, check, attacking the white king, and once the white king moves, the white rook would be lost. Black simply captures the rook. Extra rook, and will win the game. Wesley, he did set this nasty trap, this dirty trap that we showed. He just played knight back, allowing the knight to be captured, and now he captured the black pawn, hoping for check. And now, once the white king drops back, this would actually be stalemate. White unable to move, and therefore the game is a draw. But right at the very end, this is why you should never resign, never give up until it's completely over. Wesley So actually set a final trap. If we just fast forward to the end of the game, if Magnus plays maybe the most obvious move, the move I actually wanted to play instinctively, if he just brings his king to the side, this would have blown the advantage in one move again because of the same trick. White could just play rook takes pawn, giving up the rook for free, but after knight takes rook, again, stalemate. White's move, white cannot move the king. There's no checks either. So that is stalemate and a draw. Wesley coming close and setting these tricks for the world champion, but Magnus smoothly converted the advantage. Yeah, suddenly there was, well, Magnus just lost control. And we did mention earlier on, Wesley So winning this pawn, and it did become a big, big factor in the game. If we just fast forward, however, to later on, let me just find that moment. It was actually later in this position that Magnus finally lost control, and he finally made the decisive mistake in the position. Here, he should just wait with the white rook. He should just bring it to the side, anywhere along this line, and he should be able to hold the draw, because Black doesn't have enough time, actually, to cut off the white king, because now White's rook actually comes behind, and whenever the black king does step forward, there will be consequences. White actually goes after these pawns, but this is incredibly, incredibly difficult to spot. If Black ever defends it, then now there'll be a check. Once the black king moves, he goes after this pawn now, and actually, compared to the game, White is at least 3 or 4 moves ahead in the race compared to what we had, and this was incredibly difficult to find. We cannot fault Magnus Carlsen for making this mistake. Probably his mistakes arrived earlier on, a small series of mistakes adding up. Instead, this move ended his resistance. He brought his king to the side, Black gave check, and once the king moved, with this pawn push, we saw Magnus, his king was trapped on the edge of the board simply, and after the next move, we did see Black king start its journey. And compared to the variation I just showed, Black is ahead because he has this pawn running already. And in the end, it came down to 1 or 2 moves, but Magnus was just too slow with his plan. Wesley taking his chance when it came, going active with his king, pushing his pawn, doing everything you should do in a rook endgame, and that's the second time now he's beaten Magnus in this type of endgame. Actually, from this game between Carlsen and So, this blitz game. We didn't get to follow it, but it was extremely sharp, extremely complicated. We check in on this position. Magnus has white, Wesley with black, and there's so much going on right now. White's bishop has grabbed a pawn over here, but it's offside, not helping the defense. Black's bishop, phenomenal in the center of the board, really strong. It can snack on this rook any time it wants. And actually, this is where Wesley, with a promising position with black, he went wrong. He got too optimistic. He has plenty of strong moves. He can bring his rook to the side, attacking White's queen, which has no good squares, or even stronger, he can bring his queen forward and aim to use his queen to try and align with this bishop and checkmate on this diagonal. This would have been very strong for Wesley. He would have been in charge, Magnus scrambling to survive. But instead, Wesley got too excited. He captured this knight in the center of the board, giving up material, actually, in order to open up a line. But after the queen trade, after the bishop captured the rook, lots and lots of trades here, we saw a check. Maybe Wesley thought he was winning here because of this pawn, but it wasn't enough. Black's pieces actually get in the way of its own pawn. They're clumsy here, they take too long to get back, and after this move, pushing a pawn forward, Magnus suddenly got the advantage. He was about to push this pawn forward, maybe supported by this bishop. We see if Black just makes a move, then the bishop would drop back, and White has 2 pawns running up the board and would eventually win the game.